we always wanted to set out building a business where we're like doing well by doing good. And we've set that out as kind of our mission. And we set that out with our investors that, we don't want to be the people who buy properties and crank rents the next day because we can. That's why manufactured housing has the reputation it does. It's very imbalanced landlord-tenant relationship. And operators have kind of the responsibility to make sure that they're being fair. And, we set out, this is kind of one of the things I learned from my first go-around entrepreneurship, is it's super important to be aligned on like values and principles.
Your network is your net worth. Come listen to some of the most successful people I know share invaluable knowledge, stories, and advice in real estate, business, and beyond. This is Weiss Advice. Whether you want to take your business or personal life to the next level, look no further. Welcome back to another episode of Weiss Advice. I am your host, as always, Yonah Weiss. Excited to be here on another episode with Yoel Kelman, one of the co-founders of Three Pillar Communities. You may have remembered his partner, Daniel Weisfield, who was one of the top listened to episodes, I should say. So you have big shoes to fill, Yoel.
I'm not going to get there. There's a reason he goes on the podcasts.
He's a great guy. We had an awesome conversation. I'm looking forward, not to make comparisons, but to have another great conversation with you as well. So how you doing today?
I'm great, thanks. Yeah, yourself?
Doing wonderful. It's been a ride. It's been a fun time. We just got off vacation, as we call it, which is not that. It's funny when you take off like 10 days of work and then everyone's like, oh, how was your vacation? And you have to explain to people what the Jewish holidays are about. And it's extremely intense. And I'm not on, email or electric, but I'm extremely busy and it's not very relaxing.
And the whole world kept going while you were on pause.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Anyways, but that's a lot of fun. It's good to do that a few times a year just to unplug. And, not a lot of people do that. I mean, we do it every week, but it's also important to do a few times a year just to completely unplug from all social media, all email, all communication. And you know what? Like you said, the world will continue to go on. And I think one of the lessons that we learned, we just read Ecclesiastes, Koheles, one of my favorite books of the Bible. And one of the things I'm paraphrasing here, but one of the things he says over there is that, the cemetery is full of people who had important meetings they couldn't miss the next day.
Yeah.
And, life is more important. And so with that somber introduction, why don't you give us a little bit of background, how you got started in real estate and, what was your background before that?
Sure. So I started out a career knowing I didn't want to do real estate. I studied business and accounting undergrad. I went to work in consulting. I did merger and acquisition consulting, doing due diligence for private equity transactions. I did that for a couple of years and some other corporate finance consulting. I used to joke when I worked in corporate finance, like my job was to make rich people richer. So I didn't love that. Then I went to work for a year at a tech startup in online advertising. And the whole there was like get people to click and download apps. And I was simplifying these things, but they weren't really fulfilling. And then I went to business school. When I went to business school, I decided I was going to do something that I found important and meaningful. I was going to get into clean tech because the world's a mess in a lot of ways, but one of them is, we're not doing a solid to planet Earth. And so, finding ways to propagate clean energy and efficiency. So I went to business school, started working in that, met a classmate who had a business idea. It was around making homes more energy efficient and comfortable with a system of connected vents that you would put vents in central heating and cooling room, and you can modulate the vents to control the airflow and make the home more comfortable and efficient.
Oh, wow. That's so cool.
Pitched that in a class. I told him I thought it was a cool idea. Started working on a business plan with him just as kind of a class project. And then 3 rounds of financing later and, raised $10 million, brought product to market, sold it, went through manufacturing, learned a lot of lessons over 4 years, ended up running out of money, sold the company to some other folks who kept running it. And there I was kind of knowing I wanted to do something that was mission driven, having done the tech thing. And when you do a tech startup, it's really boom or bust. Like you've raised a lot of money and your investors really want to see it, go high or explode on the way.
Oh, yeah.
We did a lot of the kind of classic things of hire fast and fire slow, burn money in a bunch of places. Manufacturing is hard. It's trying to figure out what to do next. And at the same time, Daniel, my business partner, who's also my brother-in-law, He was a U.S. diplomat, went to business school. He did JD MBA, went to McKinsey. He was doing the consulting thing and decided he wanted to go buy real estate. And he calls me, and I'm at this point where I'm trying to figure out what I'm going to do next in my career. And I'm doing some consulting projects. And he goes, hey, let's start buying mobile home parks together, which when you say it like that sounds very random. But Daniel's a third generation mobile home park operator. So his grandfather immigrated to the country, was a mechanic, bought mobile home parks. His mother and aunt grew the portfolio, and they were like, hey, please come take over the family business. And Daniel's like, I want to build something, not just, manage my family's assets. So he and I had done some investing together when we were in graduate school, and we bought a duplex, converted to a triplex, bought a duplex, converted to a triplex, worked really well together. So it was kind of an idea he floated. And then while we were each of us were trying to figure out what we were doing, he was doing his exploration, I was doing mine. My wife was rear-ended in a car accident. She was fine, but her car was totaled. So a friend of mine told me how his brother bought like a car on a foreclosure, like police auction website. I was like searching for cars on a foreclosure website, and I come across 17 space mobile home park in upstate New York, in Horseheads, New York. Horseheads is next to Elmira, that place. So I find this deal, and it was an auction. It was like $10,000 or something like that. This doesn't make sense. And so I called Daniel, and I talked to his aunt, who was doing mobile home park investing for a while, got kind of a lay of the land of the questions to ask. And then I drove 6 hours out to go meet the manager of this property. And what happened was the guy who bought it like seller carry, didn't pay his water bill, didn't pay his mortgage, didn't pay his property tax. Everybody came after it, and the county got to take it because property tax has first right.
Right.
They auctioned it off, and there's this mobile home park. So Daniel and I bid on this mobile home park, and I call him and I'm like, hey, we just bought a mobile home park for $100,000. We just started a business together.
There you go.
And 10 minutes later, the auction company called and says, hey, I need $30,000 deposit on your credit card. And off we were. And so it was, we had done some real estate together, real estate investing together, but it was, calling friends and family. How'd you like to put in $5,000 or $10,000 into our first deal? And it was a lot of effort put in this tiny little park, and a ton of lessons learned, and a lot of value added, and a lot of tenants' lives improved. And that was kind of the first of, I think we've done about 40 or 45 acquisitions at this point.
Right. Wow.
Yeah.
That's an amazing beginning because, besides for your background, just the jumping in with such a funny story about these, police auction, sheriff's auctions. It's amazing how so many people got involved in real estate in like their first deal. Well, like you said, you did a few other deals before that, but the real, big deal.
This was like the first career deal. Yeah,
exactly. And that really, spurred something, which at this point, I haven't looked at the stats recently. I'm sure you can tell me the exact, but you guys are like in the top 30 mobile home park owners in the country.
I think top 50, 40, something like that.
40, 50.
I don't check it that often, but somewhere in that, maybe 30. It's possible.
Somewhere in that range. But that's pretty impressive. Like you said, 40, 45 acquisitions. I want to dig deeper because he started off talking about, and Daniel spoke about this, and he's very articulate about this point about really not just buying mobile home communities. We like to call them that nowadays, right? Not mobile home parks or trailer parks, but we want to really make a difference. Yeah. The point is, and you started off saying how you wanted to go into some sort of a career where you were making a difference in the world. It wasn't just, okay, let's get a job or let's start a business and make money. So how do you see impacting lives and as really like one of the theses of what you guys are doing?
Sure. It's a great question. So I'll answer that in a couple of ways. So, I was telling you about this property we bought where the landlord was a slime ball. I never met the guy, but he wouldn't pay his water bill. And people would have to pay their rent, and the water would get shut off. And the tenants would call the city and be like, hey, the water's shut off. And they're like, he hasn't paid his bill, but we paid him rent. So he had like warrants out for his arrest because what the city had to put the water back on. You can't shut his water off. So we came into this kind of an environment where like roofs were leaking and like this guy was just taking. And, in manufactured housing or mobile home parks, the primary business model is you rent out the land and people own their homes. In this case, the county foreclosed on everything in a sense. So we own the homes, we own the land. And when we track income, we split out what we're renting the lot for versus what we're renting the home for. And in the first, I think 2 or 3 years of ownership, every dollar we got for home rent, we put back into the homes. We broke even. We replaced furnaces, we replaced roofs. And we always wanted to set out building a business where we were like doing well by doing good. And we've set that out as kind of our mission. And we set that out with our investors that, we don't want to be the people who buy properties and crank rents the next day because we can. That's why manufactured housing has the reputation it does. Is very imbalanced landlord-tenant relationship, and operators have kind of the responsibility to make sure that they're being fair. And we set out. And this is kind of one of the things I learned from my first go-around in entrepreneurship. Is it's super important to be aligned on like values and principles. So before we even had a business, we had this one property, $100,000 property. Daniel and I spent a lot of time saying, what are the principles we want to follow and operate? How do we want to run this business? And on the one hand, you could say it was good marketing to our investors, but it's really the things we look at. And now we talk to our team, we say, hey, you're demonstrating owner's mindset, or like, hey, this is, these are the values we want to run our company by, and those are really important to us. And so it's kind of been ingrained in the early days. And, I can point to a lot of different projects and ways we've improved our communities and lives for our residents. The ones I think are the coolest are the ones where like, it doesn't always mean giving something away. We bought this property in Renton, Washington, which is just outside of Seattle.
Yeah.
And there's a 49 space park that was across the street from the cemetery where Jimi Hendrix was buried. And I say that because the owner bought the property with the intention of closing it and turning it into a Jimi Hendrix museum.
Wow.
And somehow he got the birth home of Jimi Hendrix, like this old stick-built home. And he moved it onto this property. And he had given everybody notice, we're going to shut the place down. And I mean, you can read the articles. It's kind of nutty. And then the city was like, no, you're not going to like displace 49 families for a Jimi Hendrix museum. That's not going to happen. So he's like, well, I'm going to sell it. So he was going to sell this deal, and he was going to sell it to somebody who was going to redevelop it, mixed use, multifamily. And they were having trouble closing. And we kind of found out about this deal. And we looked at it and we're like, no, this should be a manufactured housing community. It's just being run wrong. And, there were potholes. There were like a ton of abandoned cars. And there was so much like mess that people would wake up in the morning and they'd try and leave their driveway, and there'd be some car parked in the fire lane. And so we came in and we said, like, day one, we gave everyone notice, like, hey, tomorrow cars in the fire lane are being towed. Abandoned cars are being towed. Spent a couple of $1,000, towed out 20 cars. And then we came, and these are the early days where Daniel and I could be really hands-on. So we bought a trailer, like a camper, and me, Daniel, this guy Rich, like stayed on the property in this trailer. We rented a Bobcat, we rented a roller, and we like built a parking lot. We brought in like gravel and brought in rock, and he was driving around the Bobcat. And in like 4 days, we transformed the front of this property, built this parking lot. We built like 25 spaces. And we said, all right, who wants to park here? You can get a reserved space. You'll wake up every morning, you got your spot. If you park in the fire lane, you're getting towed. People were like, well, how much are you going to charge for parking? We said $25. And literally residents said, please charge more. We don't want that many cars here. So we charged $60, and we sold out all the spots. And people love the fact that they could like wake up in the morning and they could leave their driveway reliably without having to go knock on doors to find somebody to move their car. And so there we made people's lives better, and we also made a profit for our investors. And it's not to say that we don't sometimes give things away or make improvements that don't generate revenue, but those are the ones that are really, really cool.
Yeah. No, that's a great story. What happened to the Jimi Hendrix house? That's what I want to know.
It was demoed before our time. Yeah. There was one resident there who was like all about it. He was like ready to move. He's like, yeah, it's Jimi Hendrix. Everyone else was like, thanks. Yeah.
Like a shrine to Jimmy. Oh, okay. Yeah. Well, I mean, I'm sure you guys have tons and tons of stories like that. And that's incredible. Just making a difference. And like you said, you can make a difference by making a profit. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that as long as you are actually. And what I love is that it's not just about the thousands of tenants that you guys have served, the residents but also in building the company. I mean, you guys have scaled to, I don't even know how many employees by this point, but building that company culture within those values that you guys represent, I think. And I've heard this from some of people that work for you, actually. Maybe you don't know this, cool. but how much they love working for an environment where the company culture is all about, being genuinely kind and wanting to make a difference.
Thank you. That's a nice anonymized compliment. I'll take it.
Yeah. And so now moving forward, I'd love to hear, because manufactured housing, affordable housing, it's something that is a big topic. There's a huge, definite or lack of affordable housing in America. Yet at the same time, there is like this head on head, and you know exactly where I'm going with this, where you have, politicians and city councils trying to say, well, you can't actually raise rent for these mobile home communities where they're really the most affordable housing that there is. And at the same time, we're not going to allow you to make more of them, and you can't build out. So there's like this, what's the word I'm looking for? This kind of like crossroads of gridlock, right?
Yeah. It's interesting because, I mean, all the things you're describing, like we've come across in different projects. So I'll speak to that with some background, is that generally the premise has been you can't build mobile home parks. They've been written out of all the municipal codes. Nobody wants them. They're an eyesore. Nobody wants. Yeah. We started challenging that thesis about 2 years ago. So most of our portfolio originally was Washington, California, and Oregon. Very blue states, very high cost of housing, lobbyism. We've since moved out. We're like 11 states now, but that's a lot of our core. There was a community built, started like 3-4 years ago. And when it got entitled as a mobile home park, it's in Sequim, Washington, which is like, if you look at the Puget Sound, where Seattle is over here, it's all the way up here. And everybody in the Washington market was talking about this deal because they actually got a community entitled. And since then, there's been a couple more that I know of in Washington. And there's, the states where Texas, there's lots of building happening, like tens of thousands of units coming online. Florida also, but a lot of states, it's very difficult. And we said, there's a lot more land out there. And it doesn't matter where you go to a place where the home prices are $150,000 average or $800,000 average. Everybody thinks it's expensive because relative to that place it is. And what it used to cost, everywhere costs are high. And so there's an affordability problem everywhere. And we said, we should start trying to build communities because it's a needed product. And now is the sense where there's kind of a breaking point. And so we started looking, we kind of picked the market. The first market we're working on is Bozeman, Montana, which is a market that I had not heard of. And Daniel said, we got to go buy in Bozeman. And I said, why Bozeman? And then you learn that Bozeman is like the number one, booming Zoom town. When everything got shut down with COVID, everyone left New York, everyone left California, they went to Bozeman. And it's amazing. It's outdoors. You got mountains, you got skiing, you got fishing, and it's beautiful. Big sky country. And home prices went from $450,000 median price to $750,000 median price.
Wow.
The people who make Bozeman can't afford to live there. And so we tied up originally 40 acres of land. We were going to build a community. And then the 50 acres of land right next door became available. And Daniel, let's take that too. And I was like, what are we going to do with that? He's like, we'll figure it out. And now we're in the process of building a 267 unit manufactured housing community on 50 acres and 143 single family lots that we plan to sell off on 40 acres.
Oh, awesome.
We went to these, town hall meetings and community meetings, and it was like unanimously appreciated that we were doing this. Like everyone there needs it and knows they need it. Second project we're working on is in a town called Donnelly, Idaho. It's 2 hours north of Boise. It's right near Tamarack Ski Mountain. And Tamarack's like small mountain that these private equity guys came in and really built up, and it's really nice.
Oh, wow.
And they're also, it used to be single family homes, 200,000, 300,000, now 500, 600. And interestingly, this was like a subdivision that didn't get finished. So there were like a couple single family subdivision parts, and there was like this one plot left. We come in there, we say, hey, we're going to build manufactured housing community. And the range of, it was almost like pitchforks, like the anger that people had at the notion of somebody living in a manufactured home next to their single family home ranged from what about the birds that live in that undeveloped land all the way to manufactured housing communities have crime. It was everything in between. It was like, you're going to have too many units, but we don't want the people, but we need to bring in affordability. It was there were inconsistent complaints. It was like everyone was really upset. And it felt like this tale of two cities. We're in one place where housing is expensive, and they're rolling out the red carpet for us to go do this. And in another, and since then, we've kind of come back, we engaged with the HOA and kind of talked to them about where we can meet and get, we're making progress on that project happening as well. But it's interesting where, everybody wants it, but not everybody wants it in their next door. One of the things in Bozeman is there's no one living directly adjacent to, and the closest property that's residential is a single family subdivision where homes sell for $700,000. So it's kind of building like near like. And then if I look at we own properties in California where there's very strong rent control, and it's almost being told to you in certain properties that you need to subsidize the cost of living because there's an affordability problem. Same thing in Washington. We have a property, our worst performing property is one that we bought, and it was a big turnaround. There were a lot of drugs, there was prostitution. It's an RV park. And we came in with a pretty heavy fist of hey, you're breaking the rules, you're breaking the laws, you have to go. And we closed on it fall of 2019. And it takes a while to evict people in Washington. And by the time we were processing evictions, COVID started, and people stopped paying and didn't leave. And we're collecting 40% of the rent in this property.
Wow.
We're basically giving people free housing. We can't evict them. They're not paying. The criminal element has gone down, but not all gone. And Washington State, in Pierce County, it's our hands are tied. And we are giving out free housing and it's not doing anybody a service because we can't afford to invest in our property. And it's really a conundrum. And I think the answer is build more housing, but nobody wants to do that because nobody wants it in their backyard.
Right.
Sorry, that was a really long-winded answer, but I got a lot of thoughts on the matter.
I know. And that's really what I wanted. I wanted to hear your thoughts on this matter because it is such a charged topic that really, it does have a lot to do with the locations, as you said. I mean, that's just incredible. The difference between, Bozeman, Montana and, the Tamarack Mountain area in Idaho. It's crazy, the dichotomy there. But at the same time, if the state legislature or the local, county or city is not allowing you to do what you need to do as a landlord, I mean, imagine going, just any analogy that you want to, imagine like the city coming to and maybe this is what they are actually doing, but coming to the grocery stores and be like, well, you guys, you have to give away free vegetables. You can't charge for it.
Yeah. I mean, and it's interesting because the non-elected officials, the people who work for the city and the county there really were behind our project. But when the elected officials are voting on something and, the locals are really upset about it, it's hard to point to people and say they want it and they don't. These people are being very, very vocal. So that was kind of a challenge we're trying to work with and make sure that we address our neighbors and, don't try and build a project that's going to piss people off. But at the same time, if you cut the density in half, you lose the affordability.
Yeah, that's crazy. Well, what's been one of your greatest projects to date? A+++, projects.
It's funny. That's a question I really like asking real estate investors because you don't get told the hardest project, right? No one ever says my favorite project was my hardest project. And it's usually not the one you make the most money on. I think it's the ones that you're kind of most proud of.
Right.
So I think I've talked about two of them at this point. Brighton Court bought this property that was run down, really changed it for the residents for the better. The Renton property was another one where we've done well by doing well by doing good. And financially, we've done really well there. I think another one that was really cool is kind of development light. We had a property manager who was managing that Renton property, and he had moved from Yakima, Washington, which is 2 hours east. We own a big property in Yakima, and he said, I know this family that's looking to sell their property. It was built in the year 2000-ish. It's got 78 spaces, but it's only got 25 full. And that is it's a unicorn. Because somebody had spent the time to build the infrastructure for this property, but didn't fill it up. And he put us in touch with the family and really, really nice people. Dad had built the property. The son, the daughter, the aunt lived on the property. And they had 25 neighbors and really great green pastures. You see mountains. And they didn't think they needed more neighbors. And they were economically fine. They had brought a couple homes in 2007. They couldn't sell them. They were convinced it's not going to be easy to sell homes. And so they were just kind of chilling. And, they were charging really, really low rents. They were charging $200 for people when rents are $500. And so we kind of come up with them on a deal and said, they gave us a seller carry on that property because it was generating basically no money. And we came with really, really got a line on what the vision for the community was. And they said, we don't want you bringing in old homes. We said, yeah, we don't want to bring in old homes. We don't want you bringing in RVs. We don't want to bring in RVs. So we kind of had a seller carry with some pretty strict, rigid terms as what we're going to do for this property. And if we don't perform, they're going to take it back and it's going to be the vision they want. And if we perform, we're set to do really well. And one condition that I thought was they insisted that we could not raise rents more than 15%. And when you're $300 below market, we couldn't raise rents more than 12.5% whilst they had a seller carry. So when you're $300 below market and you can only get your rent raised less than $30, that wasn't going to move the needle on cash flow.
Right.
And so, okay, fine. They wanted to be good neighbors to their neighbors while they had control of the property. We got to work on April of 2019. We took over the property. We were in 10 homes, got them delivered, and just started getting set up and sold. And originally our business plan had been, we'll sell half, we'll rent half. And again, the business model of manufactured housing is better to not own the homes. It's much easier to rent a home.
To rent the lot, right?
Home than to sell it. So if you want to fill it up quickly, you sold. So the infill took longer, but by the end of last year, we had 75% full. And we bought the property for, pick some rough numbers here, $2.2 million. It appraised at 6.3-ish at the end of last year. And I think it'll probably be worth 7.5 when we finish filling it by the end of this year. And so it's a lot of work, a lot of work, but a great outcome. And we were putting people in affordable homes in a growing expensive market with 3% vacancy. The neighbors, it's nice. We still have a positive relationship with the family who still lives there. overall, we've been able to build this community and it's great.
That's some returns that you kind of like dream about,
It's a unicorn. Yeah, it is very much a unicorn. I wouldn't say it's like our most lucrative deal, but it's up there. But it definitely took a lot of work to, learn about filling up the whole community. And yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
I'd say cherry on top is it's in an opportunity zone. So we got to opportunity zone it in addition to getting the returns, which is cool.
Yeah, and that's a great value add for investors who need that capital gains coverage over there. Well, this has been a lot of fun. We could go on and on for hours. I literally have like 20 more questions for you, and each one could lead to another. But I would love to, transition to what we call the final four. And these are questions I ask all my guests. So ready or not, here they come. First question is, what is the worst job that you ever had?
So I did a little homework. I knew the questions coming up. I don't know. There's no job I look back overall, I'm like, that was terrible. I'd say maybe I had an internship probably in high school where like they didn't have work for me. So I kept like asking them for work, and every time they gave me work, I'd finish it very quickly. And even it was like, here's a stack of business cards I got at a conference, type them up into an Excel sheet. Okay. And like a day later, I'm like, hey, I'm done. And like they didn't have work. I think that's probably the worst job because there's nothing worse than sitting idly.
Listen, that's, for some people, they would, pleased with such a job like that. But that's great. I think having something to do is really important, especially when you want to work, you want to learn, you want to work. You got to know what to do. Now to have something to do.
Yeah.
Second question. What's a book you've read that's given you a paradigm shift?
I'll give you three. One is Leadership and Self-Deception. It's kind of a business book. It's a book I was told to read in a class in business school. And if you've read it, there's an irony to the fact that I didn't read it in business school. I read like a cliff notes of it. I went to class and I talked about the book as if I had read it, which the book talks about how kind of like, it's really very basic of like how you treat other people and you perceive like yourself to be different than other people. And it talks about this concept of being in or out of a box. And in doing what I was doing, I was kind of putting myself, I can't remember if it's in the box or out of the box, but it was kind of like the problem in the book. And I only found that out years later when my wife was like, oh, my coworker told me I should read this book. And I was like, I should read it too. I have it. And I read it. I was like, oh, this is a great book. And I've referred it, like told a bunch of people about it. Two others, I think there was a book I read not too long ago called Longevity. Talks about like why we live as long as we do and how humans will probably start living a lot longer. It's like an interesting thing about kind of thinking about health and diet and our existence here. And I'm working my way through how to talk to kids so they'll listen and listen so they'll talk. And it's an interesting book, both I have a 3-year-old who's talkative and doesn't listen. And also because I think a lot of the tactics sounds like a malicious word, but the kind of the interpersonal advice that you have, like how to deal with kids is also how you should deal with people. And like if your kid comes home and says, my friends are not nice, don't tell them your friends are nice. Be like, oh, tell me what's wrong. And like, let them kind of hash it out. And that's true in general. Like people often don't want their problems solved for them. They want an ear to listen.
Of course. No, that's great.
I feel like I'm saying a theme here. Like you ask me a question, I like go really long. I'll try to limit a few more answers the next 3.
We only have 2 more answers, so we're okay.
Okay.
No, but those are all great. We're going to put those in the show notes for anyone who wants to check out those 3 books. All, by the way, 3 books that I've never heard of. So it's always good to add new ones to my book list. Not that I'm getting through that list anytime soon, but it's good to add more to it. Third question is, what's a skill or talent that you would like to learn?
I'd say probably getting better at skiing. Like I've kind of learned, but my wife's from Vermont and her family are like ski experts. And so, being able to keep up is aggressive. Not fall and hurt myself the 1 or 2 times a year I get to go skiing.
Yeah. That's probably a good skill to have. That sounds like it'd be a fun thing to do. Fourth and final question. What does success mean to you?
It's a deep question. There's a lot to it. I'll say 2 things on this. One is there's a proverb. There's a saying in Ethics of Our Fathers that who is a happy person? It's somebody who's a wealthy person. It's somebody who's happy with what they have. And I think that, success is this really interesting, oftentimes moving target. I was having coffee with a friend of mine who's an entrepreneur who built a pretty nice, really, really big business. And he's like on the precipice of an IPO. And we were talking about, we've been friends for a while. We're talking about like what we thought, you think where you want to be. And then he's like, I'm almost there. But interestingly, like, the wickets move, right? Like you think you want, I'm going to speak not family like everyone, but you think you want a house. And then you're like, well, wouldn't it be nice to have a summer house? Wouldn't it be nice to have a winter house? I was once on a ferry to Martha's Vineyard for a wedding. And I saw the sign that said, doesn't your summer house need a winter house? And I think it's very easy for like success to change and morph where like you thought you wanted to get here, but now that you're here, well, success looks like that. And it really could be not just material wealth. It could be, I thought I wanted to have a portfolio of X, or I thought I wanted to have a certain number of employees, or whatever it might be. Once you get there, it's easy to kind of move the wickets. And so, I like to think of like, what's success? It's like, if you're happy with where you're at, and it doesn't mean you have to stop. I think if you stop, like, if you sit there and you've typed up all the business cards and you say you're done,
yeah.
I'm like, but I think there's something important about not continually moving what success is, but having a sense of like, I'm proud of what I've achieved. And I think that is a good metric for success.
That's great. Another long answer, but very different, a little bit different than what we had before. Not only because you're quoting from the Pirkei Avos, the ethics of our fathers, which is great. In fact, that's one of the, I think, answers that I gave when I asked myself the 4 questions, or someone asked me the 4 questions when we did that podcast. But also because, it's really giving a perspective about, there's not one answer. There's not one definition, because it's ever changing. And I think that's something important too, because we need to know, going along with your longevity book, right? The life, we don't even know what's ahead of us. And that's, I think, just being in touch with that fact can kind of drive us at least in the right direction.
Yeah. I think also I might have called that book, I might have called it Longevity. It's actually called Lifespan, if I didn't say that right, by David Sinclair. Yeah.
Oh, there we go. Okay. So we will correct that and we'll put that in the show notes too. Maybe there's another book called Longevity and they just got a shout out. So we'll
probably is. Yeah.
We'll check that out. So finally, where can our listeners find you or reach out to you?
Sure. Website's 3Pillar Communities, 3pillarcommunities.com. I'm on LinkedIn. I'm on Twitter, but I don't think I've tweeted in, years. I'm on Facebook, but I don't think I've Facebooked in years. But yeah, LinkedIn, or shoot me an email, yoel@3pillarcommunities.com. And yeah, happy to connect with folks.
Awesome. And it's amazing how LinkedIn is actually a viable option for a lot of us.
It's the most active social media I'm on, which doesn't say much, but I'm actually on it once in a while. Yeah.
There you go. Awesome. Well, We'll make sure to share this episode with everyone on LinkedIn as well. And you guys should have much continued success in your families, in your business, and in all of your endeavors. It's really amazing to be part of your kind of community, the inner circle. I joined you guys for an investor meeting recently, and it's just great to see the people who invest alongside you. A lot of them are family and friends and just amazing people. So that was fun. And, I hope we can do much more business together in the future.
Thank you. Absolutely. Yeah. Thanks a lot.
And to our listeners, thank you guys for listening all the way until the end. We couldn't do this podcast without you. So don't forget, the best advice comes only when you ask. Real quick, I have one question for you. Did you like this episode? If you did, I want to ask you a huge favor. See, the biggest thing that helps this podcast grow and that will spread this message to the whole world is that if you leave a review, a rating, and subscribe to the podcast. What that does is it basically tells the platforms that this podcast is out on is that you like my stuff and I'm doing something right. So take a few seconds out of your day, hit that subscribe button, leave a rating or review. I would be extremely grateful. Also, I want to hear from you guys. So I want to hear some feedback. If you have any questions for future episodes, please find me on LinkedIn. Send me a DM, a connection request, Yona Weiss, and I'd love to hear from you.